Howdy again everyone. When you think bird and wildlife photography, the first thought in your mind might not be medium format cameras, but Fujifilm are aiming to fix that with this little monster, their longest GF telephoto lens, the GF500mm f5.6 RLMOIS-WR. I call it a little monster. It's actually smaller and lighter than I thought it would be, quite manageable to work with actually. It's the full frame equivalent of a 395mm lens with the equivalent depth of field of about f4.5. That's about the minimum you want for bird photography, and it can get you deeply out of focus backgrounds too, potentially useful for portrait work. Well, if you can get a bit of space behind your subject, that is. F5.6 isn't very bright for sports work though, although you could give it a try if you're happy to use some very high ISO levels in your camera. And if the equivalent of 395mm isn't telephoto enough for you, then if the lens is capable of resolving 100 megapixels, you could always crop, as you can see here. Interesting. The lens is priced at $3,500 and in the UK £3,500. That might seem expensive, but for a high quality long telephoto lens on medium format, complete with image stabilization, that price might be about right here actually. I'd like to thank Fujifilm UK for loaning me this lens for a few weeks, although as usual this is a totally independent review. They also loaned me a 1.4x teleconverter, which turns the lens into a 700mm f8, the full frame equivalent of 553mm, so we'll see how well that performs too. It's expensive if you want to buy one though, at $850 or £750 here in the UK. First thing to note about the lens is that it's pretty big, but at a weight of 1.3 kilograms or about 3 pounds, it's actually lighter than I thought it'd be. I found it quite comfortable to shoot with out in a field. Its construction is a mixture of metal and plastic to keep the weight down, and it's well weather sealed with a nice gasket around the huge rear Fujifilm GF mount. Then comes a heavy-duty metallic tripod mount. It's well designed, easy and smooth to turn, and the bottom part can be removed to save on weight when carrying the lens around with you. Then comes side controls for the autofocus, focus presetting and image stabilization. Here's some footage for you with stabilization turned off and now turned on, where you can see it making an absolutely fantastic difference to the steadiness of your image. Fantastic work from Fujifilm there. Then comes an aperture ring, which has nice positive clicks every third of an f-stop and can also be locked in or out of automatic mode, a useful feature. Then comes the rubberized manual focus ring, which again turns lovely and smoothly. The focus response to turning that ring is a little jerky on big focus pulls, like on other Fujifilm lenses. In terms of focus breathing, the lens zooms in a fair bit as you focus more closely to your subject. The lens's autofocus motor runs quickly, quietly and accurately. No issues here at all, except for a little hunting now and then. When shooting with a teleconverter, I found that the autofocus slowed down a bit. You might be asking, how is the Fujifilm GFX100S 2 at bird and animal autofocus? Well, its AI is very good at detecting birds in your scene, and the continuous autofocus locks into them quite well, but it struggles a bit more than other camera systems when those animals start moving. You won't be getting loads of keepers here, but the images you do get in focus will look fantastic, and besides, shooting birds in flight is a big challenge for any camera system. The lens has a 95mm filter thread size and comes with a decent sized plastic hood with a hole for adjusting your filters. There are also some focus hold buttons at the front of the lens. Overall, the build quality is excellent here. The extensive weather sealing is a nice bonus, its autofocus fine, and its image stabilization is incredibly good. I'm glad it's not too heavy either. More importantly though, image quality. I'm testing it out today on a 102 megapixel camera, the Fujifilm GFX100S Mark II. These are images with Fujifilm's in-camera corrections. At f5.6, the lens is razor sharp in the middle of your images with excellent contrast. You want to hear some further good news? That brilliant sharpness continues right across the image frame, straight into the very corners. Amazing! Here's f8, about the same, and even f11 is very sharp, although f16 and f22 get softer due to diffraction. Still an incredible result here. It is the sharpest medium format lens I have yet covered. Okay, well, let's add that teleconverter, shall we? And now we're working at 700mm and f8. The lens continues to be bitingly sharp in the middle, with again excellent contrast. Corner image quality is just marginally softer here, still completely excellent though, really. Here's f11 and f16. Well, actually with the teleconverter you can stop down to f45 if you really happen to like diffraction softening. Overall though, the fact that your images are so sharp even with a teleconverter says an awful lot, and for bird and wildlife photographers it'll be well worth investing in. Alright, let's bypass Fuji's automatic corrections by processing some raw images with third-party software and see about distortion and vignetting. At 500mm we see just a touch of pincushion distortion, but at f5.6 vignetting is surprisingly high in the image corners. Stop down to f8 and they brighten up considerably. If you're shooting with a teleconverter, then it's about the same result, very low distortion but high vignetting at the brightest aperture. Stop down to f11 to brighten up those corners, so if you're shooting in RAW, be sure to make sure that vignetting is being adjusted correctly. The lens's minimum focus distance is about 2.8 meters, so its magnification is just about good enough for birds and other small subjects. At f5.6, close-up image quality is fantastically sharp, but contrast is a bit lower. Stop down to f8 for contrast to get back up to normal. If you use the teleconverter, then of course your magnification will be 1.4 times better. Picture quality remains the same, sharp but with low contrast at f8, but excellent again at f11. Let's see now how the lens performs against bright light. It's a fairly good performance here, with soft flaring only really emerging when bright lights are directly in your image. Next, bokeh. As I mentioned, and as you've seen, this lens is happily capable of really throwing your backgrounds out of focus, and those backgrounds look pretty gorgeous to me, in virtually every situation, even quite difficult backgrounds. Nice. Okay, well, overall, the Fujifilm GF 500mm f5.6 is an astonishingly good lens, one of the best on the system, and I pretty much loved every second of using it. The teleconverter's performance is excellent too. You should really invest in that as well. Well, if your budget allows, that is. Medium format cameras are slower than their full frame counterparts, which makes wildlife photography with this thing more challenging. But your reward is 102 megapixel images, which you can crop right into. Very handy. The lens comes highly recommended without a moment's hesitation, and it's great to see Fujifilm diversifying their GF lens range in such an exciting way. Okay, that was fun. Medium format photography might not be for everyone, it's certainly a challenge, but having a tele lens in your kit as well can make it seriously rewarding. Anyway, a special thanks to all my Patreon supporters who make such a big difference to keeping this YouTube channel going. Check out my Patreon page in the description below, where supporters get all kinds of exclusive bonus content. Ciao for now, everyone.